Hello, everybody, and welcome to News Without Prejudice. My name is Lindsay, and this is John.
Hey.
And we are here to talk about the latest legal news and everything going on in the world today. How are you doing today, John?
I'm doing fantastic. It is, you cannot tell in the studio, but there is much sunshine.
It's a beautiful sunny day.
I know. Spring has come early. Hell hath frozen over. It has stopped raining. You know, life once again feels worth living.
Yes.
You know, the sky is blue. The sun is shining. I wanted to kick us off today. My mind has been on the California bar exam. As readers may recall, California tried a new hybrid test, this latest testing cycle.
Back in February.
Back in February when admitting their new future lawyers. It was plagued with technical issues. Questions were skipped. Many couldn't even start their test. Many couldn't finish it.
Yep.
It was basically just a wall-to-wall disaster in administration and execution. And tell the good people what the latest revelation is about the California bar exam.
The latest revolution, this just came out. The California State Bar announced that they, in fact, used AI to create some of these questions on this very technically
fraud exam.
Thank you. What is a fraud? But fraud, no fraud. It was a very technically fraud.
I've been thinking about this because the legal industry basically says, for better or for worse, they say, you know, use AI and we will disbar you. But we, the bar administrators, the Bar Association, we can use AI to determine your fitness, which I think is a sort of a big admission about the capabilities of AI. I'm not saying AI is perfect, nor you should rely on it as a practitioner.
Nor should the bar rely on it.
Nor should the bar rely on it. But there's something deeply personally hypocritical about your future being decided by an AI that you are yourself not discouraged from using.
Absolutely.
It feels like a rules for me and not for thee. And my heart really goes out to the practitioners who attempted the February California bar exam.
Yeah.
California bar exam is colloquially regarded as the hardest in the country. It is more challenging than most. I would push back against that assertion, as I've said before. California also has an extremely high, disproportionate number of unaccredited law schools. So it's a challenging test tied with a high number of applicants every year who are not adequately prepared for it. And so the numbers look more depressing than they actually are. It is still a huge accomplishment. But keep in mind, I just want to, that's a huge myth, that there's tons and tons of unaccredited schools that do not prepare people for the bar exam. So it looks scarier than it is, even though it is scary.
That's some good context.
What are your thoughts, Lindsay?
It's just a damn shame. It's just a damn shame. The Bar Association's purpose is to serve these young new lawyers, and to help them get into their career in the best way possible. And it just gave them the worst opportunity. I found a quote from Katie Moran. She's an associate professor at University of San Francisco School of Law. I think she said it amazingly. She said, "The State Bar has admitted they employed a company to have a non-lawyer use AI to draft questions that were given on the actual bar exam. They then paid that same company to assess and ultimately approve of the questions on the exam, including the questions the company authored."
So that's a great, that's a fantastic, I'm glad you point that out. That is a fantastic example of a fantastic private-public partnership gone wrong.
Yeah,
Particularly a lot of the LSAT is also administered by a third-party testing company. It's overseen by the Law School Admissions Council itself, but the actual test is administered by a proctor service. I forget what their name is. It's a separate company.
Yeah.
And the idea is these sort of giant nonprofit / government entities that represent the bar pushes the hard work to a for-profit company on a fixed contract. They take the contract, but they only get a fixed amount of money for the period of service in question, and so the incentive is to make it as cheaply as possible, which is why they have non-attorneys drafting the questions, approving the questions, and it's also why they have AI writing, because then you don't have to hire people.
Wow.
It's the same incentive with animation studios, video animators, and VFX artists all across media in the United States. They're paid on fixed contracts. And so there are absolutely brutal working conditions because the studio executive, or not the studio executives, the animation studio owners, their incentive is to get the same amount, more work out of the same number of people because they don't get paid anymore.
Not cool.
And so whenever I see fixed term contracts being used for vital services, I can usually expect stuff like the lowest bidder, basically. It's tough all around. My heart goes out to the people who were subjected to the California bar exam. And the tough thing is here, there's really going to be no accountability. You can't touch the bar.
Yeah. It's done.
Yeah, and they're probably locked in on a contract for a couple of years, and by the time the renewal comes around, everyone would have forgotten all about it. The decision makers who renew the contract aren't the ones who really care. As long as they keep the wheels of justice moving, eventually, it's a system that grinds up individuals. So really sad to see.
That's that on that.
Yeah, I know. But more at 11. Law bad, more at 11. What's another story you want to talk about, Lindsay?
Yeah. Supposedly, this is not confirmed, but supposedly Pete Hegseth leaked signal war plans again.
I saw this in the news, and you and I talked about this briefly before we got on show. I think it's right that we're talking about this, but I myself am hesitant. What was it? CNN and a couple of other outlets have reported on this story that
New York Times.
Yeah, allegedly the Department of Defense is in chaos and it's marred with mismanagement, and everyone hates Hegseth internally at the DoD. Without someone to put a name to the story, I'm hesitant to believe it. Or I should say, I'm hesitant to take it as literal fact. Do I believe that Pete Hegseth is careless and unqualified, and he put the chief editor of The Atlantic in another Signal chat? Does that probably also mean he's putting other people in Signal chats? Answer, yes. But there's so much misinformation out there that the sources for this story have not come forward. I just wanted to push back, not push back on this a little bit, but just raise a yellow flag for the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. We can try to track this and the facts as much as possible, but with something like this, the information and the incidents is so under wraps. I don't know if we're ever really going to know the 100% truth on this, but I did want to point out there was an article from Politico from early this week where people are just calling out how messed up the Pentagon is now.
Yes.
Under Hegseth. It's just a complete mess.
So I think the Trump administration has gone back since these stories broke. I don't have the news stories in front of me, but I think the Trump administration has gone back and forth about we have full confidence in Hegseth. We're not backing down. Yeah. And then maybe there's rumors about him being fired. And then they're looking for a new Secretary of Defense. And then Kristi Noem gets in front of the White House press secretary briefing room and is like, nothing's happening. It's a bunch of flip-flop. I have no prediction for what'll happen here. I think Hegseth's appointment is a travesty simply because of his lack of qualification. The Department of Defense has 30,000 direct employees, and Hegseth has never managed that number of people, to speak nothing of the drinking that he admitted to during his confirmation hearings. He does have significant problems, and while I am not a Puritan, the Department of Defense is not something you want to get wrong.
Yeah, that's not something that you want someone battling addiction to be
and
fully in control of.
What's further exceptional about Hegseth's appointment is that he was only elected by or confirmed by the Senate by a very narrow majority.
Yeah, I think it was 52 to 48.
Yep, 52 to 48. And historically, Department of Defense heads have been elected, or excuse me, not elected, confirmed, there we go, by an overwhelming bipartisan, majority, 40 or 98 to 2 or something like that for the last three of them. What makes Pete Hegseth's confirmation so odd is that Department of Defense Secretary of Defense is usually an enormously bipartisan position. Trump's 2016 or 2017 nominee was James Mattis, which is known as the Warrior Monk. Everyone loved him. He was confirmed by the Senate by a vote of 98 to 1.
Wow.
On January 20th, 2017. Trump only got Hegseth through by a vote of, 52 to 48?
Yep, 52 to 48.
This is a uniquely partisan position in a normally highly bipartisan appointee office. That should not be ignored.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And there's no hint of this slowing down. I mean, James Norman Mattis, who was the 26th United States Secretary of Defense from 2017 to 2019, a retired Marine Corps 4-star general, and commanded forces in the Persian Gulf War and the war in Afghanistan and the Iraq War. Wow. Pete Hegseth is a Sunday morning Fox News host. And while he was, I believe, I want to say in the National Guard or something similar, his service was nowhere compared to the 5-star general they fired to bring him in.
Wow. That sure makes plenty of sense from me.
Yeah. I mean, it's another example of loyalty over competency.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
No more on that. What else? What other stories do you want to talk about?
There's another super quick question of loyalty over competency.
Sure.
Y'all probably heard about this. Kristi Noem got her purse stolen.
What was the story behind that?
So she was at dinner with her family.
Okay.
Just enjoying a nice Sunday evening dinner on Easter. And she had her purse under her chair. And someone who's wearing a medical mask kind of like snuck up behind her and used their foot to grab her purse out from under her chair. And then they like covered it with a coat and then dashed on out of there. First, she thought it was her kids and her grandkids playing. But no, you were being robbed. And it was something like $3,000 that she had in her purse, along with her keys, driver's license, passport, checks, makeup bag, medication, and Homeland Security clearance badge.
Well, the good news is the badges will be canceled almost immediately.
Sure.
Honestly, when I read this in the news, I didn't really care that much.
It's really not a big deal, but I think it's funny.
Yeah, it is very funny. It is.
Because I'm also thinking about Hegseth and the Signal Gate leak. What if her phone had been unlocked in her purse and there had been a Signal chat open on her phone of the next bombing to happen the next day? Huh. It's exactly... It could have been a much bigger disaster than it was.
Coulda, woulda, shoulda.
Coulda, woulda, shoulda. Got Kristi Noem fired.
I wanted to draw attention to the Trump administration is now also resuming collections of $5.3 million of student loan debt that's currently in default. Lindsay, tell us a little bit about that.
This is a huge deal. For the first time since March 2020, defaulted student loans will be collected. So about 5.3 million people are in default on their loans here. So beginning May 5th is when this whole project is going to start. So get on top of your loans, peoples.
So as a reminder, the Department of Education at the federal level manages the administration of federal student loans, not private student loans, which are distinct, though there is some oversight over private student loans. But and the Department of Education outsources the day-to-day management, like the login portal, the calls, the customer service, to several contractors. And there are a couple contractors that your file can end up with. And they've basically ordered these contractors to begin collections. Now, Department of Education loans are not, they're more powerful. They can't be discharged via bankruptcy, but that's a universal across all student loans. That's not federal in particular. They can garnish your wages far easier than most private collectors.
Which is, I've got feelings about this, but please continue.
That's bad, but that's mostly bad because the damage of student loans on it specifically targeted at a specific segment of the population, the damage is twofold. Is that one, there's tremendous opportunity cost in going to higher education, and that's important. But two, when you burden an entire generation with paying an exterior force like student loans, car payment, whatever, that money leaves the household. And the reason this matters is because baby boomers are retiring and there is a retirement crisis. Most have not saved at all enough for retirement. And usually that burden falls on the next generation, their children, right? But if those children are paying other sources like student loan debts, particularly near metropolitan cities where the cost of living is already high, that will have a double compounding effect. It's why I talk so much about Social Security and how young people should love Social Security, because the brutal edge of caring and paying for your parents is taken off by two-thirds of seniors are lifted out of poverty just by the existence of Social Security.
It's a huge deal.
And it's a huge deal. I don't. Well, okay. My thoughts on this are twofold. Is that I do think we don't need to be forgiving this debt. We need to address the root cause of the problem. And the root cause of the problem is that the federal government said we will give money to anyone to go to college anywhere, which sounds awesome. But when you have a good, right, and that good is sought by literally everyone, and then someone comes along and says to all the people wanting that good, I will give you infinite money that you can't get out of. What is the person charging that service going to do over time? Is the cost is going to go way, way up because it's like healthcare. Everyone wants it and no one's going to say no.
Yeah, it's more easily accessible than ever before.
Yeah, and the real tough thing here is that even if we forgive all the student loans, like fantastic. They're all gone. We reset the board. Oof. It's just going to happen again.
Yeah.
It's going to happen again. Assuming we don't change how the underlying system works, it's just going to happen again. And it's accelerating. Higher education tuition increased 7% on average nationwide from 2024 to 2025 over the last year. So, well, part of that might be inflation. Part of that might be other, there are more factors. It's a contributing factor.
Sure.
But the clear trend is that tuition everywhere is going up and tends to exceed the rate of inflation.
That's a little uncomfy. That's a huge increase.
The single biggest way we can make improvements here is to allow student loan debts to be dischargeable in Chapter 11 or Chapter 13 bankruptcy.
I like that.
Well, it's because it would subject the lenders to the risk. Right now, there's no risk of default because it's impossible to default on these. It will follow you until you die, or a couple of other narrow circumstances. But it will follow you forever. They can continue trying to collect it because you can't declare bankruptcy on it. And so the moment the lenders know that you can declare bankruptcy, they'll stop lending to people they don't think can pay it back. And the market will price everything in.
Interesting.
Problem.
I like it. Yeah, problem.
That's going to hurt.
Yeah.
It's going to hurt a lot, and it's going to suck. I just don't see any other long-term way to solve. It came from a very good impulse, but I don't know. I've been talking a while. What do you think, Lindsay?
I don't have anything much to expound on. I think you're right. Well, I'm thinking about the Big Ten Universities Coalition now.
Yes, tell us about that.
Yeah, so Rutgers University has organized a pact, and they're trying to get as many of the Big Ten Academic Alliance universities to sign them as possible.
Okay.
There's 18 total in the Big Ten.
Okay.
And so far, yeah.
I've always laughed at that. That's always really funny.
6 schools have joined in this pact. The point of this pact is to defend each other against potential Trump administration demands, as we've seen with Harvard and the other 6 before it. So Indiana University, University of Nebraska, Lincoln, University of Michigan, Michigan State University, Rutgers University, and University of Washington, one of our local loves.
My double, actually technically triple
Ooh.
alumni, alma mater, whatever the hell it's called, whatever
Right
I
words.
am. Yeah, exactly. There we go.
These 6 universities have joined this pact, and I will quote here. The pact is, quote, in defense of academic freedom, institutional integrity, and the research enterprise.
So the University of Washington, where my alma mater, that's the right word.
Alma mater.
But yeah, my alma mater is it's actually one of, like, I want to say top 20 public research universities on planet Earth. Last I checked the rankings. It's a very good school. I went here because it's one of the best on the West Coast, and it's in my backyard.
I would have gone. I just didn't have good enough grades.
There's always the chance to go to a fantastic other institutions in Washington State, like for example, Seattle University, Washington State University, which is different than University of Washington. I don't know what the hell branding we're doing. And the University of Washington actually has the top oceanography school in the country. Actually, on planet Earth, as far as I know.
That's so cool.
It outranks the all of the Ivy League institutions.
Wow, take that, all others.
Yes. And it's clear why these schools are banding together to target, to push back against the Trump administration because these schools are scared, and a lot of the research funding comes straight from federal subsidies because the public good is not served by the private industry. There's something called externalities, which is a fancy econ word that just means consequences. I don't fucking know what I'll just call it consequences.
Okay.
But externalities are intangibles that can be positive or negative. So a negative externality from a factory is pollution, right? The water is polluted, right? Positive externalities are generally underproduced by the private marketplace. And that's why things like public education exist, because there are huge externalities for living in a society with a well-funded public education system that the private sector was not capable of handling before we had public education. And that's because the externalities, the benefits the positive ones tend not to be concentrated enough for shareholders to adequately invest to society's needs to meet it. And the negative externalities tend to be widely enough dispersed that private interests tend to overproduce them in the market. So the market is, we should have to do a whole episode about this, but the market is highly efficient at distributing scarce resources, but it needs government to supplement it because
if it's all just private interest, the private interest just
it'll be
keeps it all.
misaligned. Yeah, it'll well, not necessarily keeps it all, but it'll be misaligned to society's optimal needs. And that's what pretty much what research grants do, is they research the things that private industries are not yet ready to pick up. Usually a lot of private industries, like the government, will do it once because it's big and expensive. And then the private industry will pick it up and iterate and refine it, and then usually find new applications. Like the Apollo program.
Oh.
No one wanted to go to the moon.
Yeah, scary.
Like a private company, even like Standard Oil, that like at the had a huge market cap. I mean, not that Standard Oil was around during the Apollo program, but like even the robber barons of ye olden 19th century did not have the capital needed to go to the moon, had that technology even existed.
It was only the government.
The only way that it could have been achieved was a massive public effort from everyone.
Yeah.
But then once we invented the technology to go to the moon, then SpaceX and Blue Origin come along decades later, refine it, make rockets reusable, bring in space tourism, iterate now that we've done it once and the government has broken ground. A fantastic example. And anyways, these schools are pushing back on and protecting themselves from that because they've seen once Trump makes a demand, you can't reason with a tiger when your head is in its mouth, says Winston Churchill. But I love that the Trump administration the other week, right after we talked about how the IRS has a bunch of administrative and legal avenues to defend itself from Trump's potential realignment of their tax status. Trump basically, his team, like the next day came out and said, actually, all those demands were a mistake. We didn't mean to send those demands, which was basically an admission. Like I have talked about, Trump is a paper tiger. When you stand up to him publicly, he can't back down. So all he can do is find a way to pin the matter. Like, he can't say he was wrong, so he has to say the next best thing while sort of extracting himself from the situation.
It was a mistake.
Yeah, same with the way he's negotiating with China, which is to say he's not negotiating with China. He's just yelling larger and larger numbers while China sits there.
Yes.
And then he just announced like yesterday that the tariffs are coming back down, and then his team said, actually, the tariffs are staying where they are.
Christ, what a mess.
Yeah, and so you can't really negotiate with something so unstable. It's very unfortunate.
That is unfortunate for sure. But, so I'm curious to see how this goes for this universities. The final thing that I wanted to point out here on this academic alliance, the Big Ten Academic Alliance organization is not endorsing this pact that so far 6 of its 18 universities have joined. So
well,
that's interesting.
That's tough. First off, the Big Ten is I have not looked this up, but I think they're a private sports association. I don't actually, because like leagues and stuff like that, leagues are not government entities. They're just random, usually conglomerates of investors. Like the like National Football League and the NFL, the NHL, National Hockey League, NBA, all those things that. There's nothing official behind them. They're just like a private association. So these associations don't want to. They will live longer than the Trump administration. There's nothing. They're not being targeted by the Trump administration. There's nothing directly in it for them to stand up for themselves. So that doesn't surprise me that it's not actually endorsed by the Big Ten because they got no skin in this game.
Yeah, they don't have anything to lose.
Well, yeah, why rock the boat? But these schools do, and I've seen like Seattle, a whole bunch of law schools signed a giant letter standing up to the Trump administration. Seattle University was among them. I forget if UW was as well.
Ben.
Yeah. And Big Ten also includes the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which is my father's alma mater. He got I know. Before he vamoosed to Cornell, back when they had a 47% admittance rate to their graduate school.
Oh.
He was at UW Madison, so they're on the Big Ten too. Good to see them kicking. Go Badgers. I also want to talk a little bit about what was I going to say? The potential of the Trump administration talking to like Ukraine. Or the way they're dealing with Ukraine. I should say it's been so interesting that the Trump administration, Marco Rubio, in particular, Secretary of State Marco Rubio. They have been negotiating ostensibly with Trump and Putin behind the scenes. They haven't been able to get Putin to like cooperate and make a deal. And I think that's been very telling of how unreasonable Putin has been in his demands. Like even with Trump and Vance in the room, they can't come to an agreement that's just tasteful enough for even Trump to publicly endorse specifics of it. In particular, I think the way Trump it's such a travesty that Trump has backed off from the supporting the Ukrainian government, which gossip about prejudice, war hawks, we love the military, go military.
Oh,
Normally that's not a position I would take, but the war in Ukraine is so unique because for 8% of our military budget, we eviscerated the Russian army's reputation of being this unstoppable monster. We've completely tied down and distracted one of our world enemies and primary rivals. We've done it with only 8% of our military budget without endangering any American lives or putting any boots on the ground. We've united Europe in defense of its, we've brought our allies closer together. And the Ukrainian people are actually willing to, make heroic sacrifices and fight for their sovereignty in a way that like Afghanistan, and Iraq, the puppet governments we set up there, they were not supported by the populace. And we've done all that just by handing over like old hardware that we weren't going to use anymore. Support was not in cash. And so this just seems like such a fantastic, and we did it for standing up to like a bully who is invading another country. It's not like we invaded anyone.
Yeah.
And this is one of the few times when I'm like, man, that sounds like too good a deal to back off on, just because the incentive on the world stage should not be that you can invade another country and expect to keep their territory.
Yes, agreed.
That I am so opposed to Russia keeping any of Ukraine because it sets a precedent that you can just like
that's okay.
That's okay to do.
Yeah.
That the world ahead will be less safe if everyone thinks that the United States will just back off and let them take chunks out of their neighbors, which Russia has also been doing with Georgia. Fun fact.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
Since like 2014, they've actually fought a war with Georgia. It wasn't so much a war because Georgia is such a tiny country in comparison, but they've actually been annexing mile by mile more of Georgia over time. Yeah,
that's good to know.
Russia has been doing this for a long time, and right now, if you recall, Ukraine, after the Soviet Union was dissolved, Ukraine, the country that became Ukraine, one of the Soviet client states, had an enormous percentage of the Soviet Union's nuclear arsenal because it was the closest to Europe in the West. So they had within their borders an enormous amount of nuclear arms that they agreed to give up in the 90s, all of them. They completely denuclearized. And now the incentive, even though Russia gave security guarantees, I think that like the incentive is now for every single country to rush for the atom bomb because I bet Zelensky is really regretting that he doesn't have tactical nukes right now, and now 20% of his country is, has been invaded by and occupied by a foreign army. And I think all of that is such a peerless waste for the potential of a safer world. I don't know. I wish I could just be like, oh, why don't we all get along? But this seems like a rare instance where I would if not support, then tolerate continued, military aid to Ukraine.
And I just wanted to add here, we are recording on Thursday the 24th.
Yep.
Donald Trump just tweeted out, Truth socialed. He truthed out this morning, quote, "I am not happy with the Russian strikes on Kiev. Not necessary and very bad timing. Vladimir, stop. 5,000 soldiers a week are dying. Let's get the peace deal done."
I think the context of that truth... God, I hate calling him that. I think the context was that like they declared a truce in the last week or so. I want to say like over Easter weekend, ceasefire. Easter ceasefire. Yeah. And then Trump declared that they had a deal, and then and then there was a massive rocket attack on Kiev, which is that's terrible. 50 people were injured, 9 were killed.
I love the Vladimir, stop exclamation mark.
Vladimir.
That's going to work.
This isn't you.
This isn't the real you, Vladimir.
Vladimir, no.
We know you're suffering on the inside.
War and peace. We love families being destroyed by international interpolitical politics.
It's my favorite thing ever.
I think. Do you want to wrap up the news segment here?
Let's call it there.
Yeah, okay. I think there's really no graceful dismount from this, so I'll just say thank you to our sponsors who definitely do not support the war in Ukraine.
No.
Emmett Law and Quimby Bar Prep. All right, we're definitely keeping this in the podcast. Whether you need MPRE prep, multiple choice question banks, or continuing legal education, Quimby's got you covered.
Definitely.
And you can go to hemmettlaw.com/GWP. Please show this show to someone you care about. Push all the good buttons. Leave us a review. I don't know what it is with you people on Apple Podcasts, but like half of our audiences are on Apple Podcasts.
Yeah, where'd you come from?
And yet we have almost no reviews on Apple Podcasts, which is really funny. Everyone on Spotify really stepped up.
You see Apple Podcasts, you see what's going on here. You got some catching up to do. Thank you for your support, everybody. We love you.
We'll see you soon. Thank you.
Bye.